Welcome to Chapter 6, Research Problems, Research Questions, and Hypotheses. Studies generally in developing new research evidence start with a problem that needs to be solved or questions that need to be answered. So the basic terminology in developing the research problem is a research problem, which is the perplexing or troubling situation, or a problem statement, which is a statement articulating the research problem and making an argument to conduct the study. The table 6.1 in your text has some really good examples of the differences between research problems, problem statements, statement of purpose, research questions, and hypotheses. That's a very good table to identify some good examples in there. So we go on to the statement of purpose, which is the researcher's summary of the overall study goal. You have research aims or objectives, which is the specific accomplishments to be achieved by conducting the study. Research questions, which is the specific queries the researcher wants to answer in addressing the research problem. The hypothesis, which is the researcher's prediction about relationships amongst variables, and you know, when you're looking at the hypothesis, you should be able to fairly clearly identify what is the independent variable and what is the dependent variable. So with sources of research problems, there's lots of different areas that you can, if you are going to be a producer of research, where you can find ideas of of topics and research problems. Certainly clinical experience, your everyday experience, is a rich source of ideas for research topics. And I bet if you just pause and think about some of the things that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis with your patients, I'm sure you could identify some research problems that you'd like to create. Another source is nursing literature. If you read often nursing literature, not only is there oftentimes the research articles are published in there so that you can be a consumer of those, but also gives you ideas of what has not been studied and what would be worthy of studying. Social issues are a great source of research problems, whether it's a local or a global. You know, think about the other class that we had about the community health disparities. Great sources of perplexing problems that you might want to research. Certainly theories, with whether they're nursing or other disciplines, and then external sources. Because ultimately it's all about the money. So sometimes if you're a producer of research, what you're responding to is developing research problems from whatever the funding agency's research priorities are. So research problems or questions. You want to make sure that they're broad enough to include central concerns, but narrow enough to serve as a guide to study design. So some of the components of a problem statement is a well-structured declaration of what it is that is problematic, what it is that needs fixing, and what it is that is poorly understood. So you know, what's wrong? What's the context of the problem? What's the background? How big is it? What the scope is? The consequences of not fixing the problem. Knowledge gaps. Is there a knowledge gap about the problem? And what your proposed solution is. How are you going to contribute to the problem solution? Statement of purpose with quantitative studies identifies the key study variables. It identifies the possible relationships amongst the variables. It indicates the population of interest, and it suggests, through use of verbs, the nature of the inquiry. So really the purpose of the study was to investigate the effectiveness of chilled and unchilled baby oil therapy for treating uremic pruritus in hemodialysis patients. So that's an example of a problem statement. Again, to investigate the effectiveness of chilled and unchilled. So you're comparing the impact of chilled versus unchilled baby oil therapy for treating uremic pruritus in hemodialysis patients. So it's indicates the population of interest in hemodialysis patients, and the problem is treating uremic pruritus. In qualitative studies, the purpose statement of purpose for qualitative studies identifies the central phenomena. It suggests the research tradition, whether it's grounded theory or ethnography. It indicates the group, community, or setting of interest, and it suggests through use of verbs the nature of the inquiry: to describe, to discover, or to explore. So example would be, the purpose of the study was to explore the experiences of Latina mothers who immigrated to the U.S. without legal documentation and without their children. So again, it was very clear that it was to explore the experiences of the population, which was Latina mothers who immigrated to the U.S. without legal documentation and without their children. So the research tradition, grounded theory is really focuses on the processes. Phenomenological is on the experience, and ethnographic is the cultural. So it really has a little bit of everything, that particular statement of purpose for that qualitative study. Research questions. So what are research questions? Well, sometimes they are direct rewording of the statements of the purpose. They're worded as questions, are sometimes used to clarify or lend specificity to the purpose statement. And in quantitative studies, they typically pose queries about the relationships amongst variables. In qualitative studies, research questions are often pose queries linked to the research tradition. So again, highlighting that the grounded theory has a tendency to have research questions be process questions. Phenomenological focuses on the meaning of questions, and certainly the cultural description is identified in the ethnographical research. The hypothesis states an expectation, a predicted answer to the research question, should almost always involve two or more variables, and suggests the predicted relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable. So quantitative researchers explicitly state their hypothesis. So the example would be, women who were sexually abused in childhood have a higher incidence of irritable bowel syndrome than women who are not abused. So the population, in a statement like that, the population is women, and the intervention is who were abused in childhood. The outcome is have a higher incidence of irritable bowel syndrome, and the comparison is that women versus women who were not abused. To continue with describing the hypothesis, it must contain terms that indicate a relationship. It articulates almost exclusively in quantitative, not qualitative studies, and is tested through statistical procedures. So in addition to that, you can also have directional versus non-directional hypothesis. So directional predicts the direction of the relationship. Non-directional predicts the existence of the relationship, but not its direction. So they have this population has more of something than somebody else, or less than something else. So in the previous statement, women that were abused have a higher incidence of irritable bowel syndrome versus compared to women that do not. So that would be a directional. There's also research versus null hypothesis. So the research hypothesis states the actual prediction of the relationship, whereas the null expresses the absence of a relationship. It's used only in statistical testing. So overall, with stating a hypothesis, you want to, in the use of quantitative research, oftentimes you see terms like whether or not the null hypothesis was accepted or supported or rejected. Taking small samples and making inferences or statements of generalizability to the whole population. So the hypothesis and the proof. Hypotheses are never proved or disproved. They are either supported or not by the study. Statistical hypothesis testing cannot provide the absolute proof, only probabilistic information to support an inference that a hypothesis is probably correct or not. Okay, welcome to Chapter 7, Finding and Reviewing Research Evidence in the Literature. So again, in this section, with this reading this week, we have identified, first of all, the research problem and talked about research questions and the hypothesis. And now that we have a solid research problem, what are the tools for literature review? A lot of you have done this already with papers not only for me, but for other classes as well. But really the purpose of literature review is to integrate research evidence to sum up what is known and not known, to shape research questions, to suggest methods, to point to conceptual framework, and to aid in assistance with interpretation of findings. So by looking at what has been done before, it gives you a great idea as to what it is that you need to emphasize in exploring your problem, your statement of your research problem. So the types of information for a research review can be the primary sources, which is the actual research reports written by researchers, or you can use secondary sources, which are summaries of studies. Certainly peripheral use of clinical anecdotes, opinion articles, and case reports can be considered, but again, they won't have all of the strength to be able to make too many assertions on there, especially if it's in opinion articles. So here's the flow of the tasks in a literature review, and this is outlined very well in your text, and this is pretty small for you to be able to take a look at. But we will go over some of the aspects and some of the steps in this workflow. First of all, to develop you need to develop a search strategy. So search bibliographic databases via the computer. So you've got access to, we've talked earlier about CINAHL, we've got PubMed. There are a variety of databases that you can search to be able to search on particular topics, whatever that you're interested in, to find the research articles that have already been done. You can use an ancestry approach, footnote chasing. So when you have, and I've done this a lot, is that when you have found, going through bibliographic databases, looking at, again, using the example of the scoring or grading lesions or wounds on diabetic patients, once you've found a fairly thorough research article, look in the footnotes or the references and sort of chase those and go back to search that particular reference site and keep on going back there. The other method is to use a pivotal early study and citation indexes to find later studies. So again, if you find a great article, either use the reference page to search back, or to take a look at studies into the future. When you're starting an electronic search, most electronic searches start with a search for substantive topics, putting in some keywords. Keywords do not have the same as subject headings in the database because most search programs have mapping capabilities. So you don't have to. It's more of a contains search rather than a begins with search. A lot of the searches are sort of use Boolean language to format their searches themselves. Um, you have and or you can link the terms together. For instance, with again with the wounds with diabetic patients, you could put in diabetic, you could put wounds, you could put grading, you could put all those in there, and it would search on those. But again, with too much information in there, you're going to get a lot of results. So you have to do a little bit of trial and error as far as what is the right combination of keywords to enter in to the right amount of data return. Types of searches in electronic databases: you can do subject search for the topics of the keywords in the database. You can do a text word search for specific words, or you can go through an author search too. And many of these databases, whether it's CINAHL or PubMed, they allow all of these types of searches. Just look for the advanced search button, and you're able to hone in on a lot of things. You can also do wildcards characters. Oftentimes, again, using the Boolean theory or search terms, is that by putting in either an asterisk or a dollar sign, it expands the search to a variety of different things. So it's not just an exact match, but anything that's related to that. So the example here is with nursing, NURS. You can come back with nursing, nurses, nursing, etc. And then here's where it uses and explains the Boolean operators that I was describing. You can also use quotation marks. The use of quotation marks around a phrase can change the search results. For instance, putting in quotation marks around high blood pressure would yield overlapping but non-identical results to high blood pressure. So it would be a contains search and not an exact search. So different databases for nursing research. We've mentioned CINAHL and Medline or PubMed. Those are two resources that you have available to you through NCU. CINAHL covers nursing and allied health literature from '82 to the present. It contains citations and abstracts and names of any data collected instruments. It can be searched through a commercial vendor, through Peace Health, as well as NCU. You have access to that. Showing you, the next slide sort of shows you the results of what you get back from a CINAHL reference. The name of the journal, year of publication, month, volume, issue. Those are all key components of your references that you document. So you should be all very familiar with what you get back from a typical CINAHL reference site. Medline is maintained by the National Library of Medicine, covers 5,000 nursing, biomedical, and health journals. It can also be accessed through PubMed, as we mentioned. And it uses a controlled vocabulary called MESH, medical subject headings, to index the entries. So it's sort of like searching for a ICD-10 code. There's actually people that identify and assign MESH terms to these articles. So perhaps it's not just the terms that are in the title, but within the subject matter itself, there might be, the research design. It might associate an indexed term or controlled vocabulary to results or things that are within the research article itself. Once you have gotten all of this, then there's from a literature review is concerned, is that once you've gotten a lot of results, then you need to identify a way of screening, documenting, and abstracting. So after identifying and potentially relevant citations, the reference must be screened. The best way to use a copy of the particular article, document and note certain actions or results, highlight those things that are of particular interest in you, and also abstract it. So take some notes of the key information. So when I was doing my literature review for my dissertation, I started out with a very broad scope. I identified the research articles that I thought would yield information for me. I did then do the footnoting and the reference searching to see other linked research articles. Once I had a body of the articles, then I made copies and I highlighted the things that were of most interest to me, and then I sorted them by topic. And so I developed a little an abstract, copied off. Oh, this was a good article that identified a research method of, again, I have mentioned that I had used Rogers' theory of diffusion of innovation, and so I categorized them. I developed an abstract on little 3x5 cards and put those together, and that helped me sort out and to develop themes, general themes within my literature review section. Evaluating and analyzing the evidence, integrate and synthesizing the information across studies for research, and again, to focus in on identification of important themes, like the Rogers theory. Analyzing the evidence in a literature review could be a variety of themes or patterns that are pursued or identified. So, you can take a look at developing your own, but what's the pattern of evidence? How much evidence is there? How consistent is the evidence? How persuasive is the evidence? What are the key gaps in the body of evidence? So it allows you to sort of, again, categorize and within major themes, also grouping them together when you're actually writing this up. You can use what types of themes? You can use methodologic themes, what methods have been used, what strategies have been used, what are the major deficiencies and strengths, and also some others generalizable themes. To what types of people or settings does the evidence apply? And again, as far as literature review, really the concept is not only to allow you to gain evidence, so to speak, and to support what your research problem is, but it helps you perhaps identify what other people have done as far as identifying what the population is, how to limit your population, to decrease the numbers of variables and extraneous variables for your study, and it also gives you some tips and some impacts on developing your overall design. So once you've done all that, then it gets to writing what a literature review is. So here's some tips. Organize the material logically, write it objectively, summarize it in your own words, use appropriate language. Several studies have found, and again, that's where you want to, in writing things up, gets back to the previous chapter when we talked about with writing, it should be objective, not subjective. It's not your own opinion, but several studies have found, this researcher found using third party, etc., and then conclude with a concise statement of the art summary of the existing evidence. Okay, welcome to Chapter 8, Theoretical and Conceptual Frameworks. So high-quality studies have a high level of conceptual integration, which means that research questions fit the chosen methods. Questions are consistent with existing evidence. They are plausible, conceptual rationale for expected outcomes, and they include a rationale for any hypothesis or interventions. So first of all, let's start with some basic understanding of terms. So what is a theory? A theory is an abstraction that purports to account for or explain phenomena. So there's a couple of different examples here. So the classical theory is an abstract generalization that systematically explains relationships amongst phenomena. Then you have a descriptive theory, which is a theory that thoroughly describes a phenomenon based on rich observations of it. You have a grand theory, a theory that attempts to explain large aspects of human experiences. And then middle range theory, a theory that focuses on specific aspects of human experience. And again, stress and anxiety is the example that the text uses. In figure 8.1, it has a great example of the health promotion model. Many of you that had taken the class on community health nursing, many of you had referenced that into your final paper, that the model of the health promotion model, the model itself, models themselves deal with abstractions. They're assembled into a coherent scheme. They represent a more loosely structured attempt to explain phenomena than theories, and they can serve as a springboard for generating hypotheses. So then you get even less specific. So concepts, you have theories, models, and then you have frameworks. Framework is a conceptual underpinning of the study. So they have theoretical framework, which is based on the theory, and conceptual framework, which is based on the conceptual model. Not every study is based on a theory or a conceptual model. However, you know, in nursing school, and especially if you go on for a master's in nursing, they will make sure that you will be required to tie any thesis work onto and base it onto a nursing theory. Some of the commonalities between theories and conceptual models. They're used as concepts, concepts within the theories or models are used as building blocks. They require conceptual definitions of key concepts, can be represented in a schematic model, are created by humans, and are developed inductively. So it leads up to something. Theories, conceptual frameworks, and models are not discovered, they are created. Some of the commonalities cannot be proven. They can generate hypotheses, and they can serve as a stimulus to research. So both theories and conceptual models can assist you in that area. Some of the conceptual models of nursing specifically are formal explanations of what nursing practice is. So the four concepts central to models of nursing are human beings, environment, health, and nursing. So in addition to that, you have conceptual models of nursing that have been used in nursing research include Roy's adaptation model. So that's based on humans are viewed as biopsychosocial adaptive systems who cope with environmental change through the process of adaptation. Another one, kinds of middle range theories. They're based a little bit more on specific phenomena. You have Beck's theory of postpartum depression that is outlined in your text. Mitchell's uncertainty of illness theory. Mitchell's is the inability of a person to determine the meaning of illness-related events. They lead to a conceptualization of uncertainty. And one of the hallmarks of that is the uncertainty in illness scale. And then the Pender's health promotion model, many of you are very familiar with it, but it explains health promoting behaviors, engages in behaviors from which they anticipate value, perceived competence, or self-efficacy, and they increase the likelihood of commitment to action and actual performance of the behavior. So again, if people have a self-perception and that they are competent and that they can do something about it, then they'll have a higher likelihood of committing to an action and actually doing something about it. Other models that are used by Nurs researchers is Bandura's social cognitive theory, which basically outlines that a belief in their own capacity to carry out particular behaviors, such as smoking cessation. Oftentimes, many of those interventions rely and found their research on, they base their research on this social theory. Prochaska's theory of trans-theoretical model is a combination of other things, but it focuses on 5 stages of change. So people have to, they go through a very logical change sequence. The health belief model, we also studied that briefly in our community health nursing. Is based on all of the perceptions of threat. You're not going to do anything until you're perceived like that something's going to be happening to you. The next one is the theory of planned behavior. It's all based on the intention to perform. So whether someone perceives social pressure or perceived control, until they have done that, will they evaluate and consider changing? And then the theory of stress and coping, excuse me, is how they evaluate and cope with the stresses of living. So these are all change behavior theories that you will likely run across as you're doing literature searches, because especially in healthcare, you're trying, in many cases, you're trying to get people to change what they're doing currently. Change their diet, change their smoking habits, change their exercise habits, that sort of thing. And there's been a use of these types of theories in a lot of that research. Examples of key constructs from shared theories is, again, the key constructs that are shared is the concept of self-efficacy. So people aren't going to change unless they feel they have the power to change. Stages of change, so basically that there's a lot of commonality between these behavior models, that changes of change, that people they go through certain levels and through certain changes, and then they have behavioral intentions, like the theory of planned behavior, is that they have to want to change and see that they can change before that they will change. Theories, some of the theories that are used in qualitative research are the substantive theory, which conceptualizes of the target phenomena. Some theories that are embedded in the theories, the grounded theory, ethnographic and phenomenological. We covered those in our previous chapter, and also there's a great explanation in your text. Please refer to figure 8.2. The next figure, figure 8.3, does a great job of explaining medication errors, and it references the use of theory or model in quantitative research. So testing a theory through deducting a hypothesis to be tested. So again, you have a theory and then a statement, and then you go to prove it, versus inductive, which is you follow a trail and then you come up with a conclusion. Testing a theory-based intervention, using theory or model as an organizing or interpretive structure, and then fitting a problem into a theory after the fact, which is really not recommended. But as far as box 8.1 in your text has a great explanation of critiquing theoretical and conceptual frameworks.